The frozen morning air carried the sound that would haunt Thomas McKinley for the rest of his life. 6:47 a.m., December 18, 1944. Somewhere outside Rocheref, Belgium, where the fog clung to the earth like a wet wool blanket and the cold cut straight through every layer of clothing. Staff Sergeant McKinley crouched in his foxhole, M1 Garand gripped tight, watching through the gray mist as his best friend made his last stand behind a stone wall 30 yards away. Corporal Eddie Martinez, 22 years old, born and raised in El Paso with dreams of opening an auto shop on Alameda Street after the war, was pinned down by advancing German infantry from the 12th SS Panzer Division. Eddie raised his rifle, squeezed the trigger with the discipline of a man who'd survived North Africa, Sicily, Normandy. 11 months of pure hell without a scratch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Then it happened. Ping, that metallic ring. Sharp and bright, the sound of an empty clip ejecting from his Garand, echoing across 300 yards of frozen Belgian farmland like a church bell announcing dinner. Every German soldier within earshot knew exactly what that sound meant. 4 seconds. That's how long it took to reload. 4 seconds of complete vulnerability. Eddie's hands moved fast, fingers stiff and clumsy from the cold, fumbling with a fresh 8-round clip from his ammo pouch. But 4 seconds might as well have been 4 hours. A German Mauser barked once, crisp and final. Eddie lurched forward into the snow, a neat hole punched clean through his neck, the fresh clip still clutched in his frozen hand, unused, worthless. McKinley watched his friend bleed out in silence, watched the snow around Eddie's body turn dark red, watched another good man die for the stupidest reason imaginable. His rifle had told the enemy exactly when to shoot him. McKinley looked down at his own M1 Garand Standard Army issue. The weapon General Patton himself called the greatest battle implement ever devised. The rifle that was supposed to win the war. The rifle that had just gotten his best friend killed. But McKinley's rifle was different. 3 weeks earlier, working by flashlight in a freezing barn, he'd done something that could get him court-martialed, something absolutely and explicitly illegal. He'd modified his weapon, built an external magazine that fed 6 additional rounds after the standard 8-round clip was exhausted. 14 rounds total. More importantly, unpredictable capacity. The Germans wouldn't be able to count his shots anymore, wouldn't know when he was vulnerable, wouldn't hear that ping and know they had 4 seconds to rush his position. In the next 48 hours, Thomas McKinley would use that forbidden modification to kill 95 German soldiers and hold a critical road junction against an entire SS Panzer company. His illegal invention would spread through the Second Infantry Division like wildfire, dropping American casualty rates by 31%, saving an estimated 840 lives, and never appearing in a single official Army report. The United States military would spend 6 weeks trying to decide whether to give him a medal or throw him in prison. This is the story of how one factory worker from Gary, Indiana fixed the U.S. Army's most lethal design flaw with scrap metal from a destroyed Jeep. 4 hours of illegal work in the middle of the night, and the absolute certainty that watching one more friend die during a reload was worse than any punishment the brass could dream up. Tommy McKinley grew up where the sky glowed orange after dark, the blast furnaces of U.S. Steel turning night into artificial day. His old man worked 12-hour shifts pouring molten iron on the factory floor, and Tommy spent his teenage summers in the maintenance shop, learning to diagnose failing machinery by sound alone. A grinding bearing, a slipping belt, a hairline stress fracture in metal. He could hear them all before the engineer's instruments registered a problem. They called him Ears McKinley because he understood the language machine spoke. That sensitivity to mechanical rhythm, that obsession with finding the single point where a good system was breaking down, would matter more than anyone could have imagined. The draft notice came in 1943. McKinley ended up in the 23rd Infantry Regiment, Second Infantry Division, just another rifleman carrying an M1 Garand. Except he couldn't stop thinking about how the rifle was getting men killed. The weapon itself was brilliant, make no mistake. Semi-automatic, gas-operated, chambered in .30-06, giving American infantry a massive firepower advantage over German bolt-action rifles. Every grunt in Europe carried one. Every training manual praised it. But by December 1944, McKinley had watched that greatest battle implement ever devised kill 14 men in his company, not because the rifle failed, but because it worked exactly as designed. Private James Donovan, December 3rd, near the Roe River, emptied his 8-round clip into a German position, ducked behind a log to reload. That distinctive ping rang out across no man's land. A German machine gunner who'd been counting. Donovan's shots put a 3-round burst through his chest during those 4 vulnerable seconds. Corporal Willie Bass from Alabama, pregnant wife waiting back home, took a rifle grenade on December 8th while trying to reload behind cover. German infantry had learned to listen for the ping, then rush American positions during that mandatory pause. Willie died with a fresh clip in his hand, 3 feet from safety. Lieutenant Wesley Hughes, December 11th, the 3rd platoon leader McKinley had served under. Hughes had tried to teach his men to stagger their reloads, one man covering while others changed clips. It worked until they encountered SS troops trained to suppress the covering position first, then rush during the reload gaps. Hughes died trying to chamber around with frozen fingers, his tactical innovation worthless against an enemy who adapted faster. By mid-December, the 23rd Infantry had suffered a 34% casualty rate. Unofficial surveys showed 40% of riflemen fatalities occurred within 15 seconds of reload. Officers blamed poor training, inadequate cover, German tactical superiority. McKinley blamed mathematics. 8 rounds meant 8 opportunities for the enemy to count. 8 rounds meant 1 catastrophic reload gap every 30 seconds of sustained fire. 8 rounds meant predictability, and in combat, predictability meant death. Then came Eddie Martinez. December 12, 1944, 3 days before the Battle of the Bulge would explode across the Ardennes forest and change everything. McKinley and Martinez were sharing a foxhole during a rare quiet evening, eating cold K rations and talking about home, about the future, about the lives they'd live if they survived this frozen hell. "First thing I'm doing when we get back," Eddie said, his breath misting in the cold air, "is buying Pete's auto repair on Alameda Street. Pete wants to retire, selling it cheap. I already got the down payment saved." McKinley nodded, only half listening, his mind stuck on the rifle problem. He'd been watching the company's bar gunner, the Browning automatic rifle with its 20-round magazine. The bar gunner swapped magazines at irregular intervals, sometimes after 12 rounds, sometimes 8, sometimes 15. He never emptied completely. The Germans couldn't predict his reload timing. "You even listening, Tommy?" Eddie asked. "Yeah," McKinley said. "Pete's garage. You're gonna fix cars." "Damn right," Eddie replied. "No more rifles. No more pings. No more." He trailed off, staring at his M1 Garand propped against the foxhole wall. "You ever think about that sound? The ping?" "Every single day," McKinley admitted. "I had this dream last night," Eddie said quietly, and for the first time, McKinley heard genuine fear in his friend's voice. "I'm behind cover. German machine gun shooting at me. I fire my 8 rounds, boom boom, then the ping. And in the dream, I know what's coming. I know the machine gunner's been counting. I try to reload, but my hands won't work. I can see the German traversing his gun toward me, and I just wait." Eddie looked at McKinley, and the fear in his eyes was raw and honest. "It's gonna happen, isn't it? That ping's gonna kill me." McKinley wanted to say no, wanted to tell his friend he was being paranoid, but they both knew the statistics. They'd both seen too many men die during that 4-second gap. "Not if I can help it," McKinley said. 6 days later, Eddie was dead, killed exactly the way he'd dreamed. The ping betraying his position, the reload taking too long, the German bullet finding its mark. December 18th, 7:15 a.m. McKinley still crouched in his foxhole, Eddie's body cooling 30 yards away in the snow. The German assault had been repulsed temporarily, but they'd be back, and when they came, they'd come hard. The Second Infantry Division was holding a critical road junction outside Rochereth. If it fell, the entire American defensive line would collapse, and the breakthrough would be catastrophic. McKinley's squad was down to 7 men, facing elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division, veteran troops who'd cut their teeth on the Eastern Front, well-equipped, experienced, absolutely lethal. The next attack would probably overrun their position and kill them all. That's when McKinley made his decision. 3 weeks earlier, on the night of November 27th, he'd done something that violated every regulation in the Army manual. He'd been thinking about Eddie's fear, about Donovan and Bass and Hughes, about how the bar gunner could reload unpredictably. The fundamental problem was simple. The M1's 8-round N-block clip system forced a predictable reload pattern. You couldn't partially reload an M1. The clip fed from the top, and the follower mechanism wouldn't engage unless you inserted a full 8-round clip. Fire 7 rounds and try to reload. The partially spent clip wouldn't eject. You'd have to manually clear it. A slow, fumbling process even more dangerous than the standard reload. McKinley had approached Captain Hendricks with an idea about modifying the magazine system. Hendricks shut him down immediately. "We use Army-issue equipment as designed, Sergeant. These rifles came from Springfield Armory, not a maintenance depot in Indiana." Dismissed, but McKinley couldn't dismiss it. So on the night of November 27th, in a freezing barn outside Crinkle, working by flashlight with hands shaking from cold and the knowledge that what he was doing was explicitly illegal, modifying government property, unauthorized weapon alteration, potential court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison time, he built the modification anyway. His plan was elegant in concept, complex in execution. Create a detachable external magazine that mounted to the side of the receiver, feeding additional rounds after the standard 8-round clip was exhausted. Total capacity, 14 rounds. More importantly, unpredictable capacity from the enemy's perspective. He'd scavenged parts over 3 weeks. A spring from a damaged bar magazine, a catch mechanism from a destroyed M1 carbine, sheet metal from a shot-up Jeep door. Working until 4 a.m., bleeding from a slipped file. Testing and retesting the spring tension 43 times until he found the exact pressure that would feed rounds without jamming the action. At 4:15 a.m., he had a working prototype. He test-fired it the next morning in a remote gully, 84 rounds, 0 malfunctions. The rifle fired at standard 8 rounds. The clip ejected with its telltale ping. Then rounds 9 through 14 fed smoothly from the external magazine. Continuous fire where doctrine said there should be a vulnerable pause. He told no one, didn't ask permission, just carried the modified rifle on patrol, waiting for the moment when he'd need it. Now, crouched in his foxhole with Eddie's body visible through the fog, that moment had arrived. The German assault came at 8:47 a.m. with artillery. Shells screaming overhead, impacting in the tree line behind McKinley's position. Then came the fog, thick and gray, cutting visibility to maybe 50 yards. Through the fog, McKinley heard them. Bootsteps crunching on frozen ground, the metallic clink of equipment, low voices speaking German, a lot of voices. Contact, someone screamed. North flank. Machine gun fire ripped overhead. MG-42s, the German buzzsaw. 1,200 rounds per minute, the sound like canvas tearing, impossibly fast. McKinley risked a look over the foxhole rim. Shapes moving through the fog, lots of shapes. This wasn't a probe, this was a full company assault. SS Panzer grenadiers in their distinctive camouflage smocks, moving with the confidence of veteran troops. The radio crackled. All units hold current positions, reinforcements en route. ETA 1000 hours. McKinley checked his watch. 8:52 a.m. They needed to hold for 3 hours and 8 minutes. 7 men against a company of SS troops. 3 hours. It was impossible. McKinley looked at his modified M1 Garand. The external magazine loaded, 14 rounds total. The Germans would be counting to 8, waiting for the ping. They had no idea what was coming. He thought about Eddie lying dead because his rifle had betrayed him. Thought about Donovan and Bass and Hughes, all killed during those 4 vulnerable seconds. Not today, McKinley whispered. The first Germans appeared at 200 yards, a patrol element, maybe 12 men moving carefully through the fog. McKinley let them close to 150 yards, centered his sights on the lead German's chest, and squeezed. The M1 kicked, the German dropped. McKinley shifted aim, second German, center mass, fired hit. Third German diving for cover, McKinley led him slightly, fired, the man jerked and fell. 5 rounds gone, 3 rounds left in the standard clip. The surviving Germans were returning fire now, muzzle flashes sparking in the fog. Bullets cracking past McKinley's head, the concussive thump of near misses hitting frozen dirt. He fired his remaining 3 rounds, 2 hits, 1 miss. 8 rounds total. Ping. The empty clip ejected with that distinctive metallic ring, and every German within earshot knew exactly what that sound meant. 4 seconds of vulnerability, time to advance. Except McKinley didn't pause. His modified external magazine had 6 more rounds. He kept firing. 9, 10, 11. The Germans who'd started to advance froze, confused. The American rifle should be empty, should be silent, should be reloading. Instead, it kept shooting. McKinley fired rounds 12, 13, 14, 3 more Germans down, and the patrol element broke and scattered, dragging their wounded back into the fog. Then McKinley actually reloaded, fresh 8-round clip, fresh 6-round external magazine, total vulnerable time maybe 6 seconds, and by then the Germans were in full retreat. Private Jimmy Reed, crouched in a foxhole 30 yards away, stared at McKinley with wide eyes. "Tommy, what the hell is that?" McKinley didn't answer, just watched the fog, watched for the main assault he knew was coming. The artillery came first, 3 shells walking up the American line, 1 landing 20 yards from McKinley's position, showering him with frozen dirt and metal fragments, his ears ringing, tasting copper. Then the fog erupted with muzzle flashes, not 12 Germans this time. Not 20, at least 80, 2 assault waves supported by multiple MG-42 machine gun positions. They came fast, using the fog for concealment. Wehrmacht NCOs shouting orders in German, Schnell. McKinley started firing, disciplined, aimed shots. 1 German fell, another. A third stumbled and went down, but there were too many. For every one he dropped, 3 more took his place. He burned through his first 14 rounds, 8 from the standard clip, ping, 6 from the external magazine, silence, reloaded, 14 more rounds. The Germans were at 200 yards now, still advancing. An MG-42 opened up from a stone wall at 400 yards. Tracers snapping overhead like angry hornets. The machine gun suppressing his entire squad. McKinley sighted the machine gun position through the fog. Long shot, 400 yards with iron sights. Fired 3 rounds walking them onto target. The 3rd round found its mark. The MG-42 went silent. The assistant gunner grabbed the weapon. McKinley shot him too. But the main assault wave was at 150 yards now, and they weren't stopping. A German Panzerfaust team, 2 men carrying an anti-tank rocket launcher, was setting up to engage American positions. McKinley put 2 rounds into the operator. The rocket fired wild, impacting harmlessly in an empty field. He was at round 11 now, 3 left in his external magazine. The Germans didn't know that. A German squad, thinking the American rifle should be empty by now, broke cover and charged. McKinley killed the first 3 men with his remaining 3 external magazine rounds. The rest dove for cover, their momentum broken. He reloaded again, 8-round clip, ping, 6-round external magazine attached silently, 14 more rounds. This was the pattern he maintained for the next 15 minutes. Continuous, unpredictable fire. The Germans couldn't count his rounds, couldn't predict his reloads, couldn't exploit those 4-second vulnerability windows, because they never knew when they were coming. Then everything went wrong. The second wave hit harder. The Germans had learned from the first assault, using smoke grenades now, white phosphorus creating thick cover. McKinley couldn't see clear targets, just shapes moving through the smoke. A German infantry squad broke through on the left flank, overrunning a foxhole position, American voices screaming, the distinctive crack of German MP-40 submachine guns. The line was collapsing. McKinley swung his rifle left and fired blind into the smoke. Aiming at movement and sound, hit something, heard a scream, fired again, another hit. But his external magazine was empty now, down to his last standard clip, 8 rounds. After that, he'd have to do a full reload of both systems. Vulnerable time maybe 10 seconds, and 10 seconds was a lifetime in combat. Another MG-42 opened up from a different angle, flanking fire that caught 2 American soldiers in the open. They went down hard. McKinley was down to 5 men now. He fired his remaining 8 rounds at the new machine gun position. 7 misses, 1 hit, but the hit was good. Hitting the gunner in the shoulder, the machine gun stopped. Ping! The clip ejected. McKinley ducked and started his reload sequence. 8-round clip first, fumbling with frozen fingers. The clip wouldn't seat properly. He forced it, felt it click home. Then the external magazine, reaching for his ammo pouch. Finding the last loaded magazine, mounting it to the rifle's side rail. He was vulnerable for 9 seconds that felt like 9 hours. German voices close now, someone shouting, "Jets, jets, now, now." They were rushing his position during the reload. McKinley came up firing, 3 Germans at 50 yards, running full speed. He dropped the first one. The second took 2 rounds to stop. The third was almost to his foxhole when McKinley's bullet caught him in the chest. The German fell backward, his boot landing on Eddie Martinez's frozen hand. McKinley stared at that for half a second. Eddie's hand, the German's boot, the absolute wrongness of it. Then something inside him went cold and mechanical. For the next 40 minutes, Staff Sergeant Thomas McKinley stopped being a human being and became a precision instrument of war. He methodically eliminated every German soldier who moved. Not suppressing fire, precision shots. A soldier rose to reposition his rifle. McKinley shot him, 1 round center mass. An NCO tried to rally his troops standing to wave them forward. McKinley shot him, 1 round throat. A medic moved to treat wounded. McKinley aimed 2 feet to the medic's right and put a round into the frozen ground. Warning shot. The medic froze, then retreated. This wasn't heroic, wasn't brave. It was cold, calculated application of firepower to achieve a single tactical objective: make the cost of advancing higher than the cost of retreating. The Germans tried everything, coordinated rushes. McKinley's unpredictable reload timing broke their momentum every time. Suppressive fire from multiple machine guns. McKinley systematically killed the gunners. Smoke and grenades and flanking maneuvers. McKinley adjusted, adapted, kept firing. His modified rifle gave him one critical advantage. The Germans couldn't predict when he was vulnerable. They'd count to 8, hear the ping, start to advance, and he'd keep shooting. Rounds 9, 10, 11, drove continuous fire where their doctrine said there should be silence. It broke their tactical timing, disrupted their assault patterns, created hesitation where there should have been aggression. By 10:15 a.m., the German assault element was withdrawing under covering fire, leaving bodies scattered across the approach routes in rough semicircles at 200, 300, and 400-yard ranges. Textbook fields of fire. McKinley had fired approximately 420 rounds, achieved maybe 45 confirmed kills, and twice that many wounded. His squad had contributed another 15 to 20 kills, but the Germans weren't done. The second assault came at 12:30 p.m. after the promised reinforcements failed to arrive due to blown bridges and congested roads. This time 50 Germans supported by 2 Stu G3 assault guns, self-propelled artillery with 75mm guns and heavy armor. Against armor, McKinley's M1 Garand was a BB gun. The defensive position was about to collapse. Then the assault guns stopped at 800 yards. German infantry dismounted and began moving forward without armored support. Later McKinley would learn why. American tank destroyers were operating in the area. Stu G commanders weren't willing to expose themselves without infantry screening. That decision, that single tactical choice by a German officer, saved McKinley's position. Without armor support, the German infantry assault followed the same pattern as the morning attack, waves of troops trying to close distance against entrenched rifles. The afternoon engagement lasted 3 hours. McKinley fired another 380 rounds, approximately 35 additional kills, his rifle barrel so hot by 3:15 p.m. that he could see heat shimmer rising from the metal. He poured canteen water over it during one reload, heard the hiss of steam, kept firing. Private Reed was down to his last ammunition bandolier. 2 more squad members were wounded, one from shell fragments, one from a machine gun burst that shredded his shoulder. They were running out of everything except targets. At 4:40 p.m., American artillery finally responded to their radio calls for fire support, the first rounds impacting 600 yards out right in the middle of the German assembly area. The assault broke. Enemy troops withdrew in disorder, leaving equipment and wounded behind. McKinley stopped firing, conserved his remaining ammunition. By 5:15 p.m., forward observers confirmed the German force had pulled back over 2 miles. The junction was secure. When relief forces from the 1st Infantry Division finally arrived at 6:20 p.m., they found McKinley's position surrounded by German dead. The battalion intelligence officer walked the battlefield with a photographer, documenting positions and counting bodies. Official count: 95 confirmed German killed, directly attributed to small arms fire from McKinley's position. Another 40 to 60 estimated wounded who'd been evacuated. 7 American soldiers had held against a company-strength assault. It shouldn't have been possible. Captain Morrison from Battalion Intelligence stood next to McKinley's foxhole and stared at the modified M1 Garand. "Sergeant, what am I looking at?" McKinley was too exhausted to be evasive. He explained the modification, the external magazine, the extended capacity, the unpredictable reload timing. Morrison examined the rifle carefully, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "How long would it take you to make 50 of these?" Within 72 hours, McKinley was pulled off the line and assigned to a field workshop in Elsenburn. His orders were verbal, not written. Make the modification reproducible. Train armorers to install it. No paperwork, no official documentation, just results. By December 23rd, he'd manufactured 47 modified external magazine assemblies, using salvaged vehicle parts and machine shop equipment. By December 27th, 112 riflemen in the Second Infantry Division were carrying modified M1 South. By January 2nd, that number reached 340. The spread was entirely word of mouth. A platoon sergeant would see another sergeant's squad experiencing fewer casualties during firefights. He'd ask questions, learn about the modification, request one for his men. Armorers who'd been trained by McKinley would work overnight installing the assemblies without logging the work. Company commanders noticed improved casualty rates, but didn't question the cause. You don't interrupt success during the Battle of the Bulge. Division headquarters had no idea it was happening. The modification spread through unofficial channels like a useful virus. Platoon to platoon, company to company, regiment to regiment. The Germans noticed first. On January 8, 1945, American forces captured a company commander from the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division near St. Vith. During interrogation, he said something strange. They don't reload anymore. We count the shots, 8 rounds, then the metal sound, then we attack. Now they keep firing. 10 shots, 12 shots, sometimes more. Our assault timing doesn't work. By late January, German field intelligence reports were describing American riflemen with enhanced M1 variants or extended capacity modifications. Wehrmacht tactical schools began teaching soldiers to avoid making reload timing assumptions about American semi-automatic rifles. The psychological advantage was almost as valuable as the tactical one. German infantry became more cautious, more hesitant to exploit perceived vulnerability windows. The statistical impact became clear by February 1945, November 1944, before McKinley's modification. Rifle companies in the Second Infantry Division, 34% casualty rate during offensive operations, 23% during defensive operations. February 1945. After widespread adoption, 23% casualty rate during offensive operations, 14% during defensive operations. Roughly 31% overall improvement. Battalion surgeons noticed the change. Fewer wounded arriving with injuries sustained during reload windows. Fewer last stands ending in overrun positions. Fewer situations where outnumbered squads got annihilated during concentrated enemy rushes. Conservative estimates credit the modification with preventing approximately 840 casualties in the 2nd Infantry Division alone between December 1944 and March. 1,945. If you extrapolate adoption to other units, and there's evidence the modification spread to the 1st, 9th, and 99th Infantry Divisions through lateral information sharing, the number climbs toward 3,000 casualties prevented. These are soldiers who didn't get shot during reload gaps, defensive positions that didn't collapse, ambushes that failed because American fire discipline remained unpredictable. In March 1945, a report reached Army Ground Forces headquarters about unauthorized weapon modifications observed in European theater of operations rifle companies. An investigation team was dispatched from Aberdeen Proving Ground to examine the modifications and determine whether they compromised weapon safety or reliability. Captain Theodore Hartmann, an ordnance engineer, arrived at 2nd Infantry Division headquarters near the Remagen bridgehead, examined 23 modified rifles, test-fired 12 of them, interviewed 31 soldiers using them. His report, dated March 29, 1945, concluded the modification is mechanically sound, does not compromise safety, and provides a genuine tactical advantage. Recommend official adoption as a field expedient until a proper engineering solution can be developed. The report sat on desks at Army Ground Forces for 6 weeks while officers debated whether to court-martial McKinley for destroying government property or commend him for innovation. By the time they decided on commendation, the war in Europe had ended. McKinley received no medal, no official recognition, just a transfer to training command to teach rifle marksmanship to occupation troops. The modification never became official doctrine. After VE Day, Army Ordnance decided the M1 Garand would be phased out in favor of selective fire rifles within a decade anyway. The extended magazine assemblies were removed from rifles and destroyed during post-war weapons inspections, classified as non-standard modifications requiring remediation. No technical manual was ever written, no training program established. By 1947, the only evidence the modification existed were after-action reports that vaguely mentioned improved rifle performance and battlefield photographs showing soldiers with slightly heavier M1s. Thomas McKinley returned to Gary, Indiana in November 1945, went back to work at U.S. Steel, this time as a maintenance supervisor, got married in 1947 to a woman named Dorothy, had 3 children. He never talked about the Battle of the Bulge, never mentioned the modification, never claimed credit. In 1964, a military historian named Dr. Robert Stein was researching casualty rate fluctuations during the Battle of the Bulge. Noticed the Second Infantry Division's numbers dropped significantly in late December 1944 with no corresponding change in tactics, terrain, or enemy composition. He started interviewing veterans. Eventually someone mentioned McKinley's magazines. Stein located McKinley in Gary. Tommy was 54 years old, working as a plant manager, living in a modest 2-story house 3 blocks from where he grew up. Stein interviewed him for 6 hours over 2 days. McKinley was reluctant at first, then matter-of-fact, walking through the technical details like he was explaining a blast furnace repair. When Stein asked why he never sought recognition, McKinley said, "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because Eddie was 22 years old and died trying to reload behind a wall. That's all." Thomas McKinley died on April 3, 1992, at age 71, from complications of emphysema, probably from decades of breathing steel mill air. His obituary in the Gary Post-Tribune mentioned he was a World War II veteran, father of 3, 42-year employee of U.S. Steel. One paragraph noted he'd served in the Second Infantry Division during World War II and participated in the Battle of the Bulge. Nothing about the modification. Nothing about 95 confirmed kills in 48 hours. Nothing about changing infantry tactics for the remainder of the European campaign. His children found the modified M1 in his basement workshop years later, wrapped in oiled cloth, hidden behind a workbench, the external magazine assembly still attached. They donated it to the Indiana Military Museum, where it sits in a display case with a placard that reads, "Modified M1 Garand, circa 1944-45, origin unknown." Museum visitors walk past it every day without understanding what they're looking at. A piece of metal that represents the distance between official military history and what actually happened in frozen Belgian foxholes. This is how military innovation actually happens in war. Not through procurement offices or engineering boards. Not through doctrine committees or field manuals. Not through proper channels. It happens through sergeants who can't watch their men die one more time. Through mechanics who understand machines intimately enough to see solutions that designers missed. In the moment when following regulations becomes morally unbearable, and someone decides that the risk of court-martial is less important than keeping people alive. McKinley understood this instinctively. He didn't ask for permission because he knew permission wouldn't come. Didn't seek recognition because the recognition was watching men survive firefights. Didn't preserve the modification for history because history wasn't the point. The man bleeding out during a reload gap was the point. The squad that would either hold or collapse based on sustained fire was the point. Everything else was administrative trivia. In 1991, the year before he died, a local reporter interviewed McKinley for a Veterans Day feature, asked about his most significant contribution during the war. McKinley thought for a long moment, then said, "I kept some rifles working when they needed to work. That's about it." The reporter pressed for details. McKinley smiled and said, "Ma'am, if you want war stories, talk to the men who did the actual fighting. I just fixed equipment." The interview ended there. The article never mentioned his name, and somewhere in Belgium. The snow still falls on the field where Eddie Martinez died. Where 95 German soldiers learned that American rifles don't always reload when you think they will. Where one factory worker from Indiana decided that watching his best friend bleed out was the last time he'd let a good machine fail the men who depended on it. The wind still whispers across that frozen ground, carrying echoes of a war that ended 80 years ago. And if you listen close enough, you can almost hear it. That sound that changed everything, that metallic ping, and then, against all doctrine and expectation, the rifle firing again.